Well, my name is Jarvis. I'm one of the pastors at the Journey Church. I want to welcome all of you and welcome to Brett Ullman. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are all on a mental health journey. I mean, we're all broken, and that's why I say that we're all on that journey for mental health, and I appreciate you coming. I was reading that 50% of Canadians are distressed because of this pandemic. I read that 45% of the US is distressed, 30% of China is distressed. So it's a relevant topic. And I appreciate you coming to provide hope, to provide guidance. And Brett, I read that you travel a lot all over North America. Is that true?
I do predominantly Canada, probably 90% Canada, but 10% the US. But I usually get usually each province once a year and hoping to get up to like Nunavut and the other territories in the next few years as well.
Have you made it to Newfoundland?
I have multiple times. Yes,
You have.
I
All
have.
right. Um, and one resource that you have made is a video called Hope for the Walking Wounded. I know personally I've shared this video with lots of different people in need with respect to their mental health. And there's actually a trailer that you can watch, Hope for the Walking Wounded, if you'd like to get a taste for the work that Brett Ullman does. Now, I heard that Ravi Zacharias passed away today.
Yeah.
I think that I saw in one of the videos that you spoke at one of their events.
I've been speaking, I think it's my third year. This was supposed to be my fourth year. It was actually last weekend. Used to be called Big Questions or Reboot. Like they've had some big deal questions. So there's usually this team of 4 or 5 of Ravi's youth. Like these are the ones who go and debate, does Jesus exist on university campuses across the country? But yeah, that was, I think I did it for 3 or 4 years. It was quite a great
Oh,
event.
that sounds like a very special time. Well, thanks for coming, and I'll turn it over to you. I'll just make the screen bigger so we can record this well.
Awesome. I am the Hope for the Walking Wounded talk. I'm actually going to use some of the slides from this. And so I'm going to share this. I like tech. And so let me put this up. It's interesting how we've all had to learn very quickly how to use presentations and things digitally as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brett. I come from a town called Ajax. Ajax is about 45 minutes east of the city of Toronto in Ontario. My background quickly, I'm an educator. I taught for 10 years in inner city Toronto, and I left that 15 years ago to do this. And this is actually my job. I do nothing other than travel. Little asterisk beside that, we're in a different season, but I do nothing really other than speak for a living. I was saying to Jarvis earlier, this is really kind of changing me because I don't need to travel as much. I'm with you today on the East Coast. I'm in Moose Jaw tomorrow night, and I'm in Calgary on Thursday night. And you couldn't really do that in normal time with any sustainable life. But I speak on current issues, a lot of them. So mental health is one of my largest. I have a talk called Parenting, Navigating Everything, which is looking at how do we create in our families good communication, time, all those good things. And then I speak on the tough stuff, sexuality, pornography, media, dating, men, all those things. I'm married with 2 kids. This is my wife, Dawn, and my 2 kids, Zoe and Ben. Zoe's in grade 12. And so if you have a high school kid, it's been an interesting end of their school year. We have a nice, expensive prom dress lying on the floor of her room right now, which will probably be used. She's heading off to university next year, a university called Western, which she might be starting in our house. My son Ben's in grade 11, and like most kids, he was, they all have lost. He was supposed to be at a camp this summer, and they canceled all camps in Ontario today for the rest of the summer. I want to walk through today very quickly. This was an image I've used for my mental health journey. And after I finished my master's, I ended up having a breakdown. And I spent a year of my life at home, anxiety, panic, and then that moving into depression. And there were a million roads offered me in a million directions. And so what I want to do tonight is very quickly give you my thoughts on what I think is a good process for this. I do just want to say, I know Rachel's online. I don't know if Carrie is, but I really appreciate listening to their 2 talks. Rachel, I did yours this morning when I was out for my morning walk. I was saying to Jarvis, I'm always worried when I'm on panels because mental health is such a delicate topic, and there's so much. Sometimes speakers give a lot of pain and a lot of misinformation, and I really agreed with everything that both you, Rachel, and Carrie, if you're on as well, I just really appreciate it. It was nice to know we're all on similar pages. So I just want to go through a couple things. First off, of what depression and anxiety even is. I think we need to understand that there is this continuum. Anxiety goes from people who are doing well, and then there's might be some people who are just worried a bit, but they're doing fine, all the way through to people with social anxiety or clinical anxiety. I was at a speaking date a year ago, and I got a ding on my phone, and it said that there was a nuclear incident at the Pickering nuclear station. I live 7 kilometers from the Pickering nuclear station. So that's a new level of anxiety as I'm heading up onto a stage. And depression's the same, from doing well to seasonal affective disorder to just depression. The only thing I kind of always like to talk about is people think that mental health is often we talk about, and now we're talking about COVID, but before we were saying it's all about phones. There are so many things that we can look at of what mental health comes from. And I kind of put some gray bars over the things that I think we're dealing with more right now. Poor diet, lack of sleep, the infinite scroll where we just sit on our phones for hours on end. Dopamine. I mean, every time we get a notification, every time anything like that happens, dopamine's the love drug. And, what do we do when you get a million hits of dopamine? And we don't know, but we're seeing today, especially with teens, they're almost like this petri dish, this test case, and we're seeing incredible anxiety growing in that generation. Our overparenting is really something we have to address, and I do this in my parenting talk, but just because we're overparenting, they are under-functioning, and we're now no longer preparing our kids for life. We're protecting them from life, so they're not prepared, and then there's lots of anxiety. Trauma, which we're seeing now, I think this is a traumatic event for almost everyone in some way, shape, and form. Isolation and loneliness is growing. Sickness, many people I know who have cancer, prostate cancer, can't have surgeries and other things. And even the growth of substance abuse, we're seeing quite a lot right now. The quote that Jarvis said earlier, I heard this morning in Global News that half of Canadians say that they have worse mental health, and I kind of would completely agree. So what I want to do tonight is just to go through what I think are the baby steps, those kind of first steps that we use. When I look down, I have my laptop because I'm using 2 computers here, but the goal is to take chaos and to make it something simple. And I love the body and the mind and the soul analogy. And I think if we're looking just at a surface, someone who helps with the body would be a family doctor, and someone who helps with the mind would be a counselor, and someone who helps with the soul would be God, pastors, prayer teams, small group leaders, and anything else. Now, here's the truth. You don't know what's wrong with you until you get assessed. Your issue might be physical, so go see a doctor. Your issue might be trauma-based, emotional, psychological issues. Go see a counselor. And now the next thing I say, language is really important in. It is very uncommon that mental health is solved by the soul. But the faith, like our faith, is what sustains us in the journeys that we're in. Like we're told in the Bible that we will have trouble. We're not told that we will be okay. We're told that God will be with us in those journeys. And so I think mental health, we need to realize kind of, it could be these things, but we need to look at how these things work. And I always kind of say they're like 3 different circles, and each of them affect each other things. My concern right now is that when we're at home, many people are not exercising, not going outside, which affects the body, but that in turn affects the mind and all these other things. And so I think what we need to do is just to do things each day for the body, the mind, and the soul. And so the first thing is every day is just a plan. So before you go to bed at night or early in the morning, make a plan of how or what you're going to do for these things. And second, I just say, is it possible? I had to laugh. My daughter was going to go do running, but she wasn't. And then we realized that her running shoes are still in her locker at high school. Well, this is the is it possible conversation. And I'm really a big fan of these weekly check-ins for all of us, whether it's a family kind of unit, whether it's, extended family or friends, but check in weekly and ask, how are we doing in these categories? I also think language is important. I believe in the body and the mind and the soul. Like it's not Jesus or medicine, as someone said. It might be Jesus and medicine and eating healthy and going for a walk. It's not or, it's and. So let me really quickly walk through what I did when I began my journey. And I'm 8 years later, as a side note, and I'm still not well. I've also been diagnosed with Lyme disease back in May, and they don't know if Lyme is actually the root of my issues, or as my doctor said, you're just really unlucky, which really dark humor, but I had to laugh because that is kind of an amusing comment. But I had a physical done. I've had a lot of blood work done. I'm at what's called a functional medicine clinic. So it's doctors, naturopaths, counselors, nutritionists, dietitians, kind of all under one roof. Sleep specialist. If you've ever been to one of these, you might remember these kinds of pictures. I think it's important, right? If you struggle with sleep, go see if there's anything wrong with you. I'm not presently on medicine. I do take what's called Ativan sometimes if I'm anxious, but presently I'm not. You can see there's a whole bunch of things, naturopaths, nutritionists. And here's what I would just say. The three biggest things I think in the body are things that we should all do, whether you're on this call tonight and you're struggling or you're not. We need to exercise daily. I think one of the problems that we had is that we were kind of thinking we had to stay inside. Staying at home still meant we're allowed to exercise. I know people who haven't left their house since March. This is not good. Like, we're not setting ourselves up for anything good when we're at home. And I know many of my kids' friends are kind of just, you're at home a lot. So whether you go for a walk around the block 3 times a day, I'm kind of going for longer walks for about an hour and a half every day. Whether you're lifting weights, doing bands, doing stretching on an online video, just do something. I think we all need to sleep more. And if you're on this call or listening later and you have a teenager, you probably realize that our schedules are different. My kids go to bed around 2 a.m. and they get up around 11 a.m. each day. And that's okay. That's not okay during school time. But right now, some of this is survival, but kids go to bed late and that's okay. And so we find we have dinners and stuff together, but it's okay for sleep. But I would just say for all of us, make sure you're getting enough sleep. And the last one, I'm not saying you have to go become keto or vegan or whatever the newest diet is, but I do think we need to eat better. I have a smoothie each morning with more powders and goodness and greens powders and seeds and stuff in it. And I just think we need to try eating healthier, which is hard because most of us are baking more. And so there's a lot of like cookies and muffins and everything else in our house. While you're doing this, I would encourage you to also do this. Go see a counselor. Counselors give you perspective. Like, you might think this is the end of your life and you realize that there's actually more. I've often posted that this is not the end. Like, this is just a journey that we are on, and like, things will change, but this is not the end of society. But get a framework, pace of life. I went through a season where I was speaking way too much during my breakdown, or just before my breakdown. I was doing a master's degree in Chicago and speaking like 200-300 dates a year. Support for your emotions, referrals, even maybe a referral to a psychiatrist if needed. And I might just say this one, which is have fun. If you're over the age of 18, we kind of stop having fun. Life gets busy, family, work, school, all these things. And I would just say it's really important to have fun. And even when you're home right now, make sure you're having fun. Whether you're online having Zoom calls and you can laugh a bit, whether you're seeing someone at a porch visit, but just make sure you're having fun. And faith is the cornerstone of our journeys. I do say it's maybe not the answer to your journey, but I'm saying it's the cornerstone of who we are that leads us through our journeys. And so everything you can do with faith is good. And I think our churches do a good job of this. Spiritual disciplines are things, they're also called spiritual practices, things you should be doing in your life every day: reading, praying, studying, giving, all these kinds of things. And there's one switch I do with this slide. If I'm in a public environment, I use this. And I think these things are all just as important. Well-being, I'm not saying just as important as faith. I'm just saying these things are important in our life. Volunteering. I know many people who are volunteering at homeless shelters and food banks right now, and that's good. Gratitude, I'm going to come back to that a bit later. Mindfulness, I'm going to come back to a bit later, and a few other ones as well. This is what I often had people say to me, and I'm just going to encourage you tonight to never say these things again. And I know we all have, but I'm just going to encourage you to never again say things like everything happens for a reason. This sounds good, and it sounds like it's a good thing to help someone, but it actually hurts, I think. Now, I also don't believe it's true or biblical. I think if you actually take this too far, it's called determinism. And determinism is actually Islamic. It's actually not Christianity. But here's how it would go. You are with someone and something bad has happened, and you're like, well, everything happens for a reason. And they'll say to you, well, what reason? And you'll be like, I don't know. and then you leave. And then they sit and they have to find in all of God's sovereignty, what is the reason for what is happening? God must have something amazing planned. He might, but maybe don't tell someone on their darkest day that God's doing this to them. Are you still reading your Bible? Kind of like if you stop, God does things to us. Words from God. I didn't grow up. I grew up in a Baptist environment. I married a Pentecostal, which is not supposed to happen. And now we attend a church called Sanctus in Ajax. But people have often said God told me something, but often I kind of wish they used a bit more discernment, because one person said I had lead paint poisoning from all my third world travels, and I speak in Canada most of the time. God won't give you more than you can handle. Sounds so good, but it's not biblical. God won't tempt us more than we can handle is in the Bible. Someone once said, God won't give you more depression than you can handle. And in the past 2 weeks, I've known 3 pastors who've taken their life. 3. This idea that, mental health doesn't affect us, even as leaders and other people, it affects all of us. I think if you look at scripture, many times in the Old Testament, it actually says things like we were burdened beyond all we can handle. And then what we do is we lean back on our faith. If you need any help, let me know. All they want you to do is just to give help. Don't say, if you want a lasagna, let me know. Or if you want me to bring you a coffee, let me know. Just bring them something. Is there sin in your life? Is kind of an often said thing to me. And I'm always like, yeah, lots. And then they don't know what to say. And they just kind of stare at me. It's like this weird, what they're trying to say. Like, there's sin in my life. I'm like, no, there's not. They're like, this is why this is happening. Have you tried praying, saying the demonic? You will be okay. I just think we should not say you will be okay, because we don't know if we'll be okay. I've had friends have brain tumors and cancer in the last few years. Again, God is with us in those journeys, but we don't know if we'll be okay. Here's what you can say. How are you today? And today is an easy one. I can answer today. If someone says, how are you? Like, are we just passing in a church hallway? And I'm like, hey, I'm good. How are you? And we pass, and that's the end of it. But ask, how are you today? Because we can answer that. Say, I'm praying for you, and then actually do it. Say something, say anything, just means that. Say something. I think so many of us who struggle with mental health, people don't ever even ask how we're doing. Give them a hug. And right now, this might not be something. I do get that. Sit with them. It's interesting. I think we've done a disservice when we began calling this social distancing as opposed to physical distancing, because people are just not even seeing each other. And I'm seeing more and more people doing porch visits. We actually went to my sister's last week, and we each went to a burger place, and we each brought food back, and we sat in their backyard like 10 feet apart and had a meal together. And it was really moving after not doing that for a while. Listen to their journey, ask, how is your struggle going? Talk about something else. And I just put shawarma there. I really love chicken shawarma. I don't know if you do or not, but it's just about food. There's something about food. If your friend really loves a Tim Hortons iced coffee, then why not tomorrow morning bring them over a Tim Hortons iced coffee? Just like, there's just something about food. I think the thing I miss most from my Baptist roots, I always say, is just the idea of potluck Wednesdays. There was just something special about eating together, people of all ages and stages. So I did blogs. I did 20 YouTube videos, and I'll send this to Jarvis later, but it's I have one blog which has all 20 of them together. But what I want you to do is just to think through these, and I'm going to go through them really quickly because each of these are about 2 minutes. And I think that each of these videos can challenge you of how to be better during this time. So we've talked about exercise, we talked about sleep and diet. Using the space just means, for some of us, like I have some friends who are in like single room apartments, and if you're lucky and you can get out and walk around, that's great. But if you're in downtown Toronto, like some of my friends are, they can't. And so some of them actually are using space. They're reading on the ground beside the oven. And I'm like, good, just using the space around their home. Connection, we just kind of talked about. Make sure you're getting connection. And as we begin to release things more and more, make sure we're continuing connection. Number 6 is just less news. This is an easy one. Stop watching the news. I mean, it's not good news. And so I know people who are just like sitting, refreshing those plot graphs day and night. Like, they're not helping us. It's just millions of people and lots of deaths. I'm not saying don't know what the news is. Maybe look on your news app once a day. Breathing is really important. And I find we're all a little stressed. And so I forget if Carrie or Rachel talked about this, but breathing is just, I always just say, put your hand on your stomach and make sure you're not breathing up here. Make sure you're breathing down with your tummy. I use an app though on my phone called Calm, C-A-L-M. There's another one called Headspace, amongst others. And we use the term mindfulness, and please don't think that mindfulness is something that it's not. It's just breathing. It's just feeling the air go over your nose and the air coming back out. It's just trying to calm our bodies. And I would say do a couple of 5-minute sessions a day. Counseling, I can't suggest to you enough, if you are struggling right now, to get some counseling. And this could be struggling in our marriage, could be struggling in our relationships, could be struggling with mental health. Schedule just means have one. There's something good about schedules. Even if the schedule says, like, I'm going to read a book in the morning and I'm going to go for a walk in the afternoon and read more. Someone challenged me on this the other day, and they said, well, I don't have any books. And I'm like, but you have a public library. And they didn't really know what to say. And I'm like, listen, I live in a town called Ajax, the Ajax Public Library. I signed online for a card and I began downloading digital books to my phone, and I can read, and they're all free. TED Talks, again, these are just things. TED Talks are just really good talks on a whole bunch of topics. Number 12, family check-in. And I would just, again, we talked about this, have a check-in as much as you can. 13 is just have more positive. We're all watching more TV, and I get that. But I would encourage you to watch more fun TV, positive stuff. Let's not just add in murder shows day and night. For those of us working, we need to limit our work because what I'm finding is some people are working from morning till night because you're not leaving to go to the office and coming home at 5. It's just there all the time. 15 is one for all of us. Give yourself some grace and mercy. This is an unprecedented thing we're all going through, and we don't need to, like I always say to the people with young kids, you're not a homeschooler unless you're homeschooling. You're just schooling from home, and they're different mentalities. If your kids go to public school, just do the best that you can right now. The things we miss jar is just the idea of a jar. This is a marbles analogy for another talk, but put into this like little sticky notes. And every time usually it's called a gratitude jar. So you had a great dinner with family, stick it in there. During COVID, I'm saying make it a things we miss jar. So have your kids write down, I miss seeing grandma. I miss going to church. I miss going out to McDonald's, whatever it is, and rip it off and put it in there. And I think the idea to me would be that it's kind of a redemption. When we're able to do something, you can take it out and, like, whether you burn it or rip it up and throw it in the garbage, but just redeem the things we're missing. 17 is listening to music. I think this is a big one. Like, put on some headphones and just listen to some good music. 18 is just the idea, and it's a little bit like in Alcoholics Anonymous and things, where the goal of the alcoholic is to get to the end of the day. Let's just worry about today. And there's a book and there's a quote in this one you can have a look at. Just looking at the beginning of your day, make some, like, how are you going to do things? And at the end of the day, you question, how did they go? Number 19 is just eating dinners as a family. I know people who still are not eating together as a family. They're all at home. They're still just, everyone grabs food and leaves. There's just, for the parents with younger kids, like, there's nothing like family dinners is where so much parenting happens, where relationship happens. And 20, I just have some cards there, but it's just puzzles and games. Please do, some of us need just some repetitive tasks. I know a small group, I spoke to some small group leaders last night, and I challenged them to do is, like, just distribute those things. Like, if you have a Settlers game and you played it in your board, switch it to someone else and they can pass a puzzle over to you. Some quick thoughts. Dr. Dan Siegel once said this: we need to help, and let's change the word children to everyone. We need to help everyone understand that the clouds of their emotions can and will roll on by. This is a season, and seasons change. It's the same with our emotions. It's the same with our anxieties and different things. He's actually a phenomenal author as well. It's also okay to not be okay. Perry says, though, it's just not okay to stay that way. And I like part of that, but there's people with schizophrenia and bipolar and other things that it's not as simple as just work your way through that. But it's okay to not be okay, especially in a season like right now. We're not on autopilot. Everything's kind of up in the air. And I would just say this: if something you're doing isn't working, try something else. Like, if what you're doing to try to help yourself in this season isn't working, find other things. The musician Bruce Cockburn, I'm 40, almost 49. If you're my age, you remember Bruce, but he once sang, "To kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight." And I would just say mental health is a fight. And so I encourage you to fight. What I see too often in our church world, though, is what I would just call apathy. It's a lot of sitting and a lot of just kind of waiting. And Winston Churchill once said, never, never give up. I want to give you some resources. We'll do some Q&A and we'll be done. This is a new thing that I just found. And Jarvis, you might want to actually copy that and put it in maybe in the chat. But it's a weird thing. It's called Wellness Together, but it's ca.portal.gs. But what I really, really like about this is that it is a simple, it's a thing from the government. Oh, I clicked. A thing from the government, and there's lots of assessments, and there's actually some free counseling and group coaching. But it's a new thing they've put online with COVID, and I kind of really like this. My website is just my name. It's brettallman.com, and I realized I didn't put that anywhere, but just Brett, B-R-E-T-T, Ullman is U-L-L-M-A-N.com. If you click where it says blog, you will get all the different categories, mental health being one of them. And if you go there, I think there's 900 articles and blogs and videos on this site. Mental health and parenting would be the most by far. But anything I find that's really good, I post on this, and all my social media is across the top there. I have more YouTube videos on mental health. The walking one on the bottom, I began walking every day, January 1st. I wasn't feeling well. My health wasn't great. And it's interesting how walking changes things. I'm down 24 pounds. I'm sleeping a little bit better, and I'm now eating better. It's funny, the idea of make a step and do things, and when you start something else, it starts something else from that. But these are online. All the talks that I do we've also posted online. My mental health talk, The Walking Wounded, Jarvis mentioned earlier, I posted on YouTube. I had 7 people I know write me with 7 suicides in 7 days. And I just said to my wife, this is our fundraising, but if this is able to help someone, I'm okay throwing it online. You can find these all on YouTube. I do have 4 books. The last 2 are the ones that are currently out on mental health. First, Your Story was written with another pastor and a psychologist, and this was before my breakdown. So it's good information, but it's not that body, mind, and soul analogy. And Reset, if you just search it on my website, it's 18 stories of friends and family who've dealt with burnout, breakdown, and suffering, leading to hope and healing. I also am a big fan of reading, and what I do is I take the best books that I can find, and I kind of give you these lists. On my website, under blog, you can click on great books. So I give you 2 videos. One is my top books on mental health. And I put this in here too, my top 7 books on loneliness, which is, I think, a really important thing. The other 2 books I actually have with me here. The first is called The Ripple Effect. It is neither of these are faith-based, but they're so practical. This says sleep better, eat better, move better, think better. And in it, each little thing are little things that you can do, like these 1% changes. And then, you do those little changes and then make more changes. And the second book is what I think is one of my favorite books on mental health. It's called The Anxiety and Phobia Workbook by Edmund Bourne. Now, this is the 6th edition. The 7th one recently came out. I think you can actually get it anywhere you buy books. But I just think these are good, practical conversations. And if you look in my top mental health books, you'll find some of the faith-based ones as well that kind of take our faith and mental health and put it together. My new book is just about out. You're the only group I can actually show this to, but this is actually the book. I am just about to read through it for my last time. This is really scary, but it's been the last 3 years of my life. And so this is actually a book, the same kind of size as this one. And there's 16 chapters on every topic, but mental health is the largest chapter in this by far. And the goal was to really help parents. But for some of the other categories, you can either help your kids or help you as well. And we're thinking it will be out in June. 2 slides, and we'll do some Q&A. My counselor one day said this to me: great courage with great care. And I really like this. It's just the idea of great courage. Like right now, maybe we're not able, all of us, to go to work. I'm seeing more and more people doing it. But if you're worried about going to work or doing something, good, take courage, go do what you need to do, and then take good care. And I think that some of us don't know what care means. Like, what are those things that fill you up? What are those things that fill up your soul? Whether it's, time with God, whether it's Skyping grandma, whether it's getting a coffee, whatever it might be, you should know these things. And as parents, we should also try to help our kids know these things. I like the body, the mind, the soul analogy because we don't know what's going on with us. And each of us, if we're struggling, we can kind of walk down each of these paths. But if it's not you struggling, but loved ones, you can still help them with this, right? You can look at how you can help them. Have you been to your doctor? I'll drive you to your doctor. I got a great counselor. Why don't you go see them? And like faith, come to church, help them with the things that we do with our faith. that's kind of my talk tonight, really a brief version. There is so much content on my site. I'm actually more of a curator than a blogger. I do YouTube videos, probably one a week. I did 20 in a row recently, but my website is just filled with the best content I can find anywhere in the world. And so I'll pass it back to Jarvis, and if we have any questions, we can go from there. I will say this too: if you have questions after tonight, I put a lot of content into 20 minutes, and I'm a fast talker. I do know that. But if you tonight suddenly have a question, please feel free to just send that back to me at another time.
Well, that's wonderful. You've given this a lot of thought, and it's a great resource for all of us. Really appreciate that. And I'll send you a few questions now. And if you have any more questions, send them away. Here we go.
What are warning signs of poor mental health? Give me one sec here. I actually had some of these in the talk from last night. Let me see if I can find it. I mean, the truth is there are all kinds of these. Do I still have them here? I can't find it. The most basic, changes in mood, right? Changes in mood, thinking, and behavior. So people who are sad, I mean, we're all a little off these days. Changes in eating and sleeping patterns. And again, here's the problem with any sign that I give you could be a sign that there's mental health, or it could be a sign that you're just a normal person. Like changes in sleeping patterns. Many people are going to bed later and getting up a bit later. That doesn't have to mean that it's mental health. Changes in your sleeping patterns, changing in mood, irritability, anger, frustration, people lashing out, self-deprecation, people who are, a lot of belittling of themselves and different things. I think one of the biggest signs that scares me, though, is actually no signs. And if you read a lot of articles on mental health, they use a term a lot like high functioning, that many of us are high functioning depressives or high functioning people. And people would look at me and say, oh, you look good. And it's like, I struggle in here. I struggle in here. Like any of us here, I can be staring at you and inside you could be in turmoil. So I think what we do is when we talk about these things, we can talk about them with everybody and kind of give people the answers to everybody, because it's not just the people you think who are struggling. Number 2, you want me just to go through these?
Yes, sure.
Sure. Can you explain that mental illness is nobody's fault? Well, if you switch mental illness to cancer, I think we give a different set of rules for mental health than we do for any other ailments. Cancer, diabetes, other things. I don't think for mental illness to me, there's 5 reasons we suffer in life. One is that we're living in a fallen world. Like Genesis 3, right? We live in a fallen world and we're deeply affected by people. Number 2 might be the effects of others' sins. Like you guys in the East Coast just had the horrible tragedy of all the shootings. Like there are things that people do that affect people. Number 3 is our own sinful nature. Like for me, I think I worked too hard for too long. And I think that I might've been a little bit of a cause of my own breakdown. Number 4 is Ephesians 6:12, which we don't do well, I find. Either everything is demonic or nothing, but the truth is it's in the scriptures. And so how do we find a way to, Neil Anderson has a book called The Bondage Breaker, which is a really good beginning place there. And the last thing for suffering is all the things that when, it's good for me to be afflicted so that I might know your decrees. Like there's verses you read and go, I don't like that. Like in Amos, it talks about the redrawing of the plumb line. But I would just say that just like if someone gets cancer, it's not their fault for the most part, other than someone who works too hard and has a breakdown. The idea that you have some mental illness, it's not that you did something. You didn't do something to deserve it. It's not God's punishment. It's that we live in a fallen world and we're affected by it. How do you deal with shame when it comes to mental health? That's an interesting one. I think when I first see, what's interesting for me is that because I travel and speak, I live in the public eye. And so suddenly I finished my master's and I stopped sleeping. And then I began to get very dizzy and almost pass out at speaking events. And you can't see it, but I'm 6'6". And I almost fell over at a talk. And people began, and I had to cancel a few dates, and people began asking me what's going on. And it was interesting because I felt shame. There is so much stigma, and especially as a man, not saying that women don't have it, but I just find with men, we don't like doctors. You know, I'm a guy, like I'm strong, I should be fine. And this is not about strength. It's not about men or women. But when I posted once online that I'm struggling with mental health, I was blown away at the dozens of messages from other men and women who said, I'm also struggling. And it's interesting, very quickly when I realized that I'm not alone, my shame kind of left. And I realized it's not something I did. It's just something that I have. And so for me, it's one of those things just to recognize that you didn't do this, and there's a lot of us who struggle, and how can we help you, and how can we find a way for you to move forward? Whistling in the dark. Is that a question or just a lyric to a song?
Just a comment to what
You'd like me to go whistle in the dark? I only got the 3. Do you have more?
I have not, unless anyone wants to ask an audible question at this time. You have to hit the unmute button.
I had someone the other night, they wrote me and said, I was upset you didn't answer my question. And I said, what question? And they're like, didn't you hear me? And I'm like, no. They had no video and no audio, and they were mad at me.
It's kind of hard to, when you don't see people in front of you, sometimes it's hard to remember there's people in front of you.
I think we all need to look at how can we get a little bit better? Like, no matter who's on the call tonight, each of us can look at, well, what is something I can do today? John Maxwell always says, like, what is one thing that you could do to get better? And maybe it's exercise, maybe it's diet, maybe it's a friend, like whatever it might be. I think we can all look at moving forward with our mental health. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, for anything great to happen, there needs to be a long obedience in the same direction. It's one of my favorite quotes, just the idea of like days done well over and over again.
Well, thank you, Brett, for being a resource for us during this time. I've heard it said that pain is real, but so is hope. And
like
you've painted a picture of hope for us. And thank you so much.